Every 26 seconds, a property is stolen or encroached upon in America, but I never thought it would happen to me, and definitely not by my own neighbor. I still remember the first time I saw her Karen. Perfectly manicured hair, expensive sandals, a glass of wine in one hand, and that signature HOA-approved fake smile on her face. She had just moved into the neighborhood a few months ago, but somehow she was already acting like she owned the entire block. Back then, I had no idea what was coming. No idea that this woman, who pretended to be friendly, would soon try to take something I worked my entire life for. No idea that my quiet, peaceful life was about to spiral into chaos, accusations, and betrayal. And no idea that I'd one day have to stand face to face with her and fight back. At first it was subtle, little comments here and there. "Oh, your fence is a little too far over the property line, isn't it? You know, technically this patch of land falls under the HOA's landscaping control. We should really affix your backyard layout to make it uniform with the rest of the neighborhood." I laughed it off at first. Everyone knew Karen was, well, Karen. She liked control. She loved rules, and more than anything, she loved power. But I was wrong to underestimate her, because what started as passive-aggressive comments turned into full-blown threats, and then an all-out war. You see, I had purchased my home 3 years ago, cash down, clean title. I'd saved for years, working 2 jobs, skipping vacations, sacrificing everything just to own this property. And right behind my backyard sat a small but beautiful 10-foot strip of land, technically mine, legally recorded in the county deed office. I planted flowers there. My kids set up their little wooden swing set. On weekends, I'd barbecue with my friends under the old oak tree that shaded the space perfectly. It wasn't just land. It was mine. It was my safe place. It was home. But Karen, she saw something else entirely. She saw opportunity. It started one morning when I woke up and found bright orange flags stuck into my backyard soil markers used by surveyors. I hadn't called anyone. I hadn't requested any inspection. I walked outside, confused, and that's when I spotted her. Karen, standing at the edge of my property, talking to 2 men in neon vests holding surveying equipment. "Karen," I called out, "what's going on here?" She turned slowly, smiling that cold, practiced smile of hers. "Oh, don't worry," she said sweetly. "The HOA is just doing some boundary checks. Nothing serious." But something felt wrong. My gut twisted. I called the county clerk's office later that day, and that's when I found out the shocking truth. Karen had filed a boundary dispute claim on my property. I can't even describe the feeling, my heart racing, my stomach sinking. How could she do this? How could someone I waved to every morning, someone whose kids played with mine, suddenly decide that my land was actually hers? And worse, the HOA backed her up. Apparently, Karen had convinced several board members that my backyard wasn't mine. She brought documents fake, outdated plats claiming the HOA controlled that 10-foot strip. They sent me a warning letter. Failure to comply with HOA's property adjustment request may result in fines, penalties, or forced removal of unauthorized structures. Unauthorized structures. They were talking about my swing set, my barbecue pit, my garden. All of it gone, unless I gave up and signed an agreement releasing my claim to the land. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about rules. This was theft, and Karen wasn't stopping anytime soon. Over the next few weeks, things got ugly. I started getting anonymous notes on my doorstep. "You're making this harder than it has to be. If you just cooperate, everyone will be happier. Don't make Karen your enemy." Someone even spray-painted HOA rules on my trash can one night. I tried reasoning with her. I tried being civil, but she wouldn't budge. Then one evening, after a particularly tense HOA meeting, Karen approached me in the parking lot. She leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper, but sharp like a knife. "Listen carefully," she hissed. "That land will be mine whether you like it or not. Sign the agreement or regret it." That night I barely slept. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. What do you do when your neighbor turns into your enemy? What do you do when the system, the HOA, the board, the surveyors all seem to be on their side? I wanted to fight back, but I didn't know how. Yet, all I knew was this: if I didn't stand up for myself, I'd lose everything I had worked for. And that's when I started digging. I spent hours researching property records, boundary maps, and HOA bylaws. I went through every single county archive, cross-checking Karen's so-called proof. And then I found it, the smoking gun. A document buried deep in the archives, one Karen clearly didn't expect anyone to find. It proved beyond any doubt that the 10-foot strip of land was legally mine, stamped, signed, and recorded. That's when I realized something chilling. Karen didn't make a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She had planned this. And right then, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be intimidated. I wasn't going to be bullied. I was going to fight back, no matter what it took. What I didn't know at the time was just how far Karen was willing to go, how deep her connections with the HOA really ran, and how much destruction she'd leave in her wake before this battle was over. When I first bought my house, I thought I had finally made it. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. A quiet little cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood. Kids riding bikes after school. Neighbors waving when you drive by. It looked like the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen. I'd spent years working 2 jobs, sacrificing weekends, skipping family vacations, saving every penny just to afford this place. For me, it wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of everything I worked for. And for a while, it was perfect. Peaceful mornings on the porch, barbecues with friends in the backyard. The sound of laughter echoing when my kids played on the swing set under the old oak tree. I thought I had found home. I had no idea that just a few doors down, someone was watching me, planning, waiting. Karen moved into the neighborhood a year after I did. At first glance, she seemed harmless, friendly even. She brought over cookies on her first week, introduced herself, and gushed about how thrilled she was to join such a prestigious community. But Karen wasn't like the other neighbors. Where everyone else kept to themselves, Karen inserted herself into everything. Within a month, she had somehow landed a spot on the HOA board. Within 3, she was vice president. And that's when things started to change. Suddenly, we were getting weekly emails about mandatory uniformity. Karen started inspecting lawns, measuring trash can placements, and citing violations that had never existed before. It wasn't long before everyone knew Karen wasn't here to make friends. Karen was here to control. I should have seen it coming. Looking back, all the signs were there. It started with a casual conversation one evening. Karen was walking her dog past my backyard when she stopped at the fence and said, "Sweet as sugar. Oh, I didn't realize your swing set was so close to the property line. You know, technically that area might belong to the HOA. I frowned. I own this land, Karen. It's on my deed. She smiled, that same cold, fake smile that never reached her eyes. We'll see about that. At the time, I brushed it off. But what I didn't know was that Karen had already been scheming. One Saturday morning, I stepped outside and froze. Bright orange survey flags dotted my backyard like landmines. A pair of surveyors were walking around, measuring distances, talking quietly among themselves. I stormed over. "Who sent you?" One of them looked up. "The HOA hired us, said there's a boundary dispute." Boundary dispute? No one had ever told me about one. That's when Karen appeared right on cue, sipping her coffee, pretending to be casual. "Oh, don't worry," she said sweetly. "It's just a routine check. Standard HOA procedure." But I knew better. Karen had set this up. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. A thick, official-looking envelope with the HOA seal stamped on the front. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. It claimed my backyard swing set, barbecue pit, and even the flower garden I'd spent years perfecting were all on HOA controlled land. The letter demanded I remove them within 30 days, or face fines of up to $500 per day. I was furious. I grabbed my deed, my county plat maps, everything, and marched straight into the next HOA meeting. Karen was sitting at the head of the table like she owned the place, flanked by 3 board members who barely glanced at me. I slammed my paperwork on the table. "This is my land. It's legally mine. Stop harassing me." Karen leaned back, crossing her arms, her expression calm, almost smug. That's funny," she said, "because according to our documents, it's not. If you disagree, take it up with the county, but until then, the HOA has final say." The board voted against me, 4-1, just like that. After that meeting, things changed. Suddenly, I started getting anonymous notes on my doorstep. "Stop fighting. You can't win this. Karen always gets what she wants." My trash cans were knocked over at night. Someone egged my mailbox. Even my kids noticed a strange car slowly driving past our house late at night. It wasn't just about land anymore. It felt personal. Karen wanted to break me. And the HOA, they stood right behind her, backing her every move. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat alone on the porch staring at that 10-foot strip of land. It wasn't just dirt. It wasn't just grass. It was everything I had worked for, and I was watching it slip through my fingers because one power-hungry neighbor decided she wanted control. I thought about giving in. I really did. But then I remembered the years of sacrifice, the extra shifts, the sleepless nights, the dream I had built from scratch. No, I wasn't giving up. Not now. Not ever. I spent the next several nights digging through every county record I could find. I pulled plat maps, old boundary surveys, HOA bylaws, everything. And then I found it. Buried deep in the archives, there was a single signed document from over a decade ago, a boundary adjustment approved by the county recorder's office. The document proved beyond any doubt that the 10-foot strip of land was legally mine. Karen hadn't made a mistake. She knew. She'd been lying from the start. And in that moment, something inside me changed. I wasn't just defending my property anymore. I was going to expose her. You'd think that once I found the legal document proving the land was mine, the nightmare would end. But the truth? That's when it really began. Because the moment Karen realized I wasn't backing down, she changed her game plan. She stopped hiding behind fake smiles and HOA policies. She decided to destroy me. 2 weeks after I discovered the document, I walked into my backyard one morning and froze. My swing set was gone. The barbecue pit ripped out. Even my flower bed was destroyed. Soil scattered everywhere. I ran to the HOA office furious, waving the legal proof in their faces. "I have the deed," I shouted. "You had no right to touch my property." Karen just sat there at the head of the table, legs crossed, sipping her iced coffee like nothing had happened. "According to HOA policy," she said calmly, "we had full authority to remove unauthorized structures. If you have an issue, file an appeal." I stared at her, shaking with anger. "This isn't an appeal, Karen. This is theft." She smiled, that same smug, knowing smile I'd grown to hate. "Then sue us." The room went silent. The other board members avoided eye contact, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They weren't just afraid of Karen. They were under her control. Within days, the rumor started spreading. At the local grocery store, 2 neighbors whispered behind my back. At the gas station, someone muttered under their breath as I walked past. Even my kids came home from school asking why other children were saying we were stealing land. Karen had gone door to door, telling everyone I was trying to take HOA-controlled property, claiming I was a freeloader, a rule breaker, someone who thought the rules didn't apply to me. Suddenly, I wasn't just fighting for my backyard anymore. I was fighting for my reputation. Then the letters started. The first one was slipped under my door. "Back off or you'll regret it." The second came 2 days later. "Karen always wins." And then the third. We know where your kids play. That one broke me. I stayed up all night, pacing every creak in the house, making my chest tighten. I started installing cameras around the property, adding extra locks on the doors. Even the kids noticed how tense things had become. "Daddy," my daughter whispered one night, "why is Miss Karen so mad at us?" I couldn't answer her. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that your neighbor, someone you once waved to every morning, has turned into your enemy? A few days later, I received another official-looking envelope in the mail, a violation notice. Apparently, according to the HOA, my roof color wasn't uniform enough with the rest of the neighborhood. Then came another. My mailbox design didn't comply with aesthetic guidelines. And another, I had improperly stored trash bins. 3 violations in a week, each carrying a fine, each designed to bleed me dry. This wasn't about property lines anymore. Karen wanted to crush me financially until I had no choice but to give up. I called the HOA office furious. "You can't just keep making up violations," the secretary whispered softly, glancing around like she didn't want to be overheard. I'm sorry, but Karen's pulling the strings. If I don't send these notices, I lose my job." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just Karen. This was systemic. The family feels the pressure. It wasn't just me suffering. The tension seeped into every part of our lives. My wife stopped sitting on the porch in the evenings because she felt watched. My son quit playing in the backyard, terrified after hearing the threat about where your kids play. Even family gatherings became awkward. Nobody wanted to come over anymore, afraid of getting on Karen's bad side. I started noticing cameras on other houses pointing toward mine. Were they watching me, or was I just losing my mind? The stress was eating me alive. Then came the night that changed everything. It was just past midnight when I heard a noise outside, a soft crunching sound, like footsteps on gravel. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out into the backyard. At first, I saw nothing. The swing set was gone, the flowers destroyed, just darkness and silence. And then, I caught a glimpse of something moving near the fence line. I crept closer, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw them. 2 men, both dressed in black hoodies, digging holes near my property markers. "Hey!" I yelled. They froze, then bolted. I chased them to the street, but they disappeared into the night. The next morning, I checked the damage, and my blood ran cold. The property markers were gone. They'd been removed. Without markers, Karen could argue there was confusion about the boundaries. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was sabotage. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't fight this quietly anymore. I needed help. I needed backup. I contacted a real estate attorney, explained everything, and handed over the legal proof I'd found in the archives. He studied the documents carefully, then looked up at me and said the words I'd been waiting to hear for weeks. "You're in the right, and if Karen and the HOA are altering property lines and removing markers, that's felony-level fraud." It was like a weight lifted off my chest, but it also meant the fight was just beginning. The attorney advised me to gather as much evidence as possible: security footage, photos of the removed markers, copies of every threatening note, HOA bylaws, the original property documents. I spent the next several days building a case. But Karen must have sensed I was preparing for war, because that's when she made her boldest move yet. 3 days later, another envelope appeared on my doorstep, this one marked urgent. Inside was a final notice of compliance from the HOA. It stated in bold letters, "Failure to remove all unauthorized structures and surrender disputed property will result in legal action and possible foreclosure proceedings." Foreclosure. They were threatening to take my entire home. I sat there on the floor, letter in hand, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This wasn't about the swing set anymore. This wasn't about Karen's ego. This was about control. If Karen won, it wouldn't just be my land. It would set a precedent for the entire neighborhood, a message to everyone. Fight the HOA and we'll ruin you. I knew then. If I didn't stop her, nobody would. I thought I had seen the worst of it. The threats, the lies, the harassment. I thought I was prepared for anything Karen in the HOA could throw at me. But I was wrong, because nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. It was a Thursday morning. I was sipping my coffee on the porch when I heard the rumble of heavy machinery. I stepped outside and froze. A bulldozer in my backyard. 3 workers in neon vests were marking off the 10-foot strip of land, my land, with orange spray paint. A 4th man stood holding a clipboard, giving orders. I ran down the steps yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" One of the workers pointed toward the street. "Talk to her," he said. I turned, and there she was, Karen, standing proudly with her arms crossed, HOA badge clipped to her blouse, sunglasses hiding the smug look I knew was there anyway. "Karen," I shouted, "you don't have permission to be on my property." She smirked. "Oh, actually we do," she said coolly. "This land belongs to the HOA now. You lost. Get over it." I stormed toward her, waving the document I had dug up from the county archives, the one proving the land was legally mine. "See this? Signed by the county recorder's office. This isn't your land, Karen. It's mine." Karen didn't even flinch. She leaned in close and whispered, so only I could hear, "That document won't save you. I've got friends in places you don't even know exist." For the first time, I realized just how deep this went. No, Karen wasn't just some power-hungry neighbor. She had connections. And she wasn't bluffing. That night, I came home to find a certified letter waiting on my doorstep. It wasn't from the HOA this time. It was from the county zoning department. It stated that a formal complaint had been filed against me, claiming I had illegally extended my property line and built structures on land I didn't own. And guess who filed the complaint? Karen. If the county ruled against me, I wouldn't just lose the land. I'd face fines and possible criminal charges for encroachment. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was war. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced, going over every possible outcome, every potential move. The next morning, I called my attorney. He listened quietly, then sighed. "Zane," he said, "they're setting you up. Karen's using her position on the HOA to make this look like a legal issue instead of harassment. But I've seen this before, and I promise you, we can beat them." I didn't know how, but I trusted him. So we started gathering everything. Photos of the removed property markers, screenshots of threatening emails, security camera footage of the men digging near my fence, copies of every letter and violation notice. And then my attorney said something that changed everything. If Karen coordinated with the HOA to falsify documents and alter property boundaries, that's fraud, and fraud means felony charges. I stared at him, stunned. "You mean I can press criminal charges if we get enough evidence?" "Absolutely." That weekend, I went to the county clerk's office to request certified copies of every property-related document tied to my address. The clerk pulled out a stack of files, and right there, buried in the middle, I found something shocking. A boundary adjustment form, signed by Karen, filed 3 months ago. The form claimed the HOA had legally acquired my 10-foot strip of land through a vote. But when I cross-checked the HOA meeting minutes from that month, there was no record of any vote. Karen had forged the entire thing. My hands shook as I scanned the document. This was it. This was the evidence I needed to bring her down. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Monday night. Oh, I walked in with my attorney at my side and a folder full of evidence under my arm. Karen sat at the head of the table as usual, acting like nothing was wrong. I stood up and slammed the folder down. "Before we start," I said loudly, "I have something to show everyone." I pulled out the forged boundary adjustment form and held it up for the entire room to see. "This," I said, "is a fraudulent document filed by your vice president without the board's approval, without a community vote, and without county authorization. This is illegal. Gasps echoed around the room. Karen's face turned pale, but she tried to recover. That's not what it looks like, she stammered. My attorney stepped forward, placing the certified county document on the table. It's exactly what it looks like, he said coldly. And if you continue this harassment, we'll be filing felony charges for property fraud, forgery, and harassment not just against Karen, but against anyone on this board who helped her. For the first time, Karen was speechless. Just when I thought it was over, one of the other board members, an older man named Mark, stood up, shaking his head. I can't do this anymore, he said, his voice trembling. Karen made us sign off on fake reports. She threatened to have us removed if we didn't go along with her plan. The entire room went silent. Mark reached into his briefcase and pulled out printed emails, dozens of them showing Karen coercing the board, forging votes, and manipulating financial records. I couldn't believe it. I had expected resistance, denial, maybe even more threats. But instead, Karen's own allies were turning against her. Karen shot up from her chair, slamming her hands on the table. "You think you're going to ruin me?" she screamed. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything from me?" I met her glare and didn't flinch. "I'm not taking anything from you, Karen. I'm just taking back what's mine." She looked around the room, realizing everyone was watching her lose. And then she stormed out. By the end of the meeting, the board voted unanimously to remove Karen from her position as HOA vice president. But as I walked out that night, a chill ran down my spine, because something told me this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat, and deep down, I knew she'd be back. I thought it was over. Karen was removed from the HOA board. Her forged documents were exposed. The board finally admitted the truth. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. But I should have known better. Because Karen wasn't done with me. Not even close. For a few weeks, things were quiet. No threatening letters. No HOA notices. No strange cars parked outside my house at night. I spent evenings on the porch again, watching my kids laugh and play under the old oak tree. It felt like life was finally returning to normal. But deep down, there was this gnawing feeling in my gut like a storm was brewing. And then, one night, the storm hit. It was 2:37 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of glass shattering. I shot out of bed, heart pounding, and ran toward the noise. The sliding glass door in the kitchen was cracked wide open, shards of glass scattered across the floor. And then I heard it, the faint hum of an engine revving in the distance. By the time I stepped outside, headlights were disappearing down the street. I called the police immediately, but when they arrived, they couldn't find anything except spray-painted words on the side of my garage. "You haven't won." There was no signature. But I didn't need one. I knew who it was. If I thought Karen's retaliation would be limited to vandalism, I was wrong. Because the next week, I got an envelope in the mail from my mortgage company. Inside was a notice of delinquency, apparently. I had missed 3 consecutive payments. I stared at the paper, confused and furious. "That's impossible," I muttered. "I pay online every single month." When I called the bank, they told me something I couldn't believe. My automatic payment account had been disabled, and someone had rerouted my payment credentials. They traced the IP address. It came from inside the HOA office. Karen had access to everything when she was vice president, including confidential homeowner data. And even though she'd been removed, apparently she'd left behind a digital trap. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was sabotage. And this time, it was criminal. My attorney immediately filed a formal complaint with the county sheriff's office, attaching every piece of evidence we had collected: the forged boundary adjustment form, security footage of men digging up property markers, Karen's spray-painted threat, the bank's statement tying the account breach back to the HOA office. Within 48 hours, the sheriff approved a full investigation into Karen and several HOA board members who had supported her. That's when everything started unraveling. The investigation revealed something shocking. Karen had been embezzling HOA funds for months. While the board thought they were approving landscaping upgrades and community events, Karen had been pocketing thousands. And she wasn't just stealing money. She was laundering it, moving funds through fake construction invoices linked to a company owned by her brother-in-law. It was a massive scandal. But Karen wasn't about to let herself go down quietly. She fought back hard. A few weeks later, I found myself sitting in a county courtroom. Karen had lawyered up, trying to sue me for defamation and emotional distress. I sat across from her, our eyes locking like two predators circling before the kill. Her attorney stood, painting Karen as the victim of a smear campaign. He accused me of harassing her, of spreading lies, of turning the community against her. But then, my attorney stood. One by one, we presented the evidence. The forged documents, the threatening letters, the hacked payment account, the bank's digital trail, witness statements from HOA board members who confessed to Karen's coercion, and then the bombshell. The sheriff's investigator stepped up and revealed financial records proving Karen had stolen over $86,000 from HOA funds. The entire courtroom gasped. Karen's face went pale. This wasn't just a property dispute anymore. This was a felony case. 2 days later, the judge ruled in my favor. Karen's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could never file it again. But it didn't stop there. The sheriff's department arrested Karen on charges of fraud, forgery, cybercrime, and harassment. The HOA immediately dissolved the old board and appointed a temporary committee until new elections could be held. My 10-foot strip of land permanently secured. But even as the dust settled, I couldn't shake the feeling this wasn't really over. 2 weeks later, I received a plain white envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. No threats. No demands. Just 5 chilling words, handwritten in bold black ink. This isn't the end. No signature. No explanation. But deep down, I knew. Karen was gone. But someone else, someone bigger, someone higher up had been backing her all along. And this fight, it was just the beginning. I thought it was over. Karen was arrested. The board was dissolved. My land was safe. But the truth was far more dangerous than I ever imagined. Because Karen, she wasn't working alone. In the weeks following Karen's arrest, the neighborhood transformed. Gone were the angry HOA notices, the constant threats, the sleepless nights. Neighbors came by with cookies, apologizing for not getting involved. Kids started playing outside again. Even the local Facebook group turned from drama to dog pictures. For the first time in months, I felt safe. But that peace didn't last. 2 months later, the county appointed a temporary HOA committee, 3 new members, all supposedly independent, tasked with restoring order. They called for a community meeting at the local recreation center. I walked in expecting progress. Instead, I walked into chaos. People were yelling. Neighbors were accusing each other of spying. And the committee's president, a man named Gregory Lang, kept dodging questions about where the HOA's missing funds had gone. When I asked for full financial transparency, Gregory's cold blue eyes locked onto mine. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a warning. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about Gregory didn't sit right with me. So I started digging. Public records, tax filings, property documents, anything I could find. And that's when I stumbled onto something terrifying. As it got, Gregory wasn't just some random homeowner. He was the CEO of a real estate development company, one that had been quietly buying up foreclosed properties all across our county. And guess what? Every single foreclosure had one thing in common: the HOA. The HOA would file penalties and liens on properties, push homeowners into financial distress. And when they couldn't pay, Gregory's company would swoop in and buy the properties at a fraction of their value. Karen wasn't just a rogue neighbor with a personal vendetta. She was a pawn in a massive land grab scheme. The very next day, I noticed a black SUV parked across the street from my house. No plates, tinted windows. Engine off, but someone was inside. For 3 nights in a row, the SUV was there, watching. I confronted one of the new HOA members, a nervous-looking woman named Elaine, and asked what Gregory's real intentions were. She froze. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "You need to stop digging before it's too late." Then she walked away without another word. 2 days later, I woke up to find an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a single photograph of me, standing in my driveway the night before, staring at the black SUV. On the back, in messy handwriting, were 3 words: "Stop or else." My hands shook as I held the photo. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was organized intimidation. Remember David, the former HOA treasurer who had testified against Karen in court? He called me one evening, panicked, saying, "There's something I didn't tell the police. About Karen, about Gregory, about the whole board." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop the next morning. But David never showed up. When I tried calling, his phone was disconnected. 2 days later, his house was completely empty, like he'd vanished overnight. The official story? David moved out of state. But his car was still in the driveway. I didn't believe it for a second. At this point, I knew the sheriff's office wouldn't help, not without proof. So I decided to get it myself. Late one night, I broke into the HOA storage room behind the community center using a copied key David had given me weeks before. Inside, there were boxes of financial documents, contracts, and meeting minutes. One folder in particular caught my eye. It was labeled Project Echo Confidential. Inside, I found a stack of maps, zoning requests, and emails between Gregory's company and a powerful city developer. The plan was clear: force out homeowners, consolidate properties, sell the land to a luxury developer for triple the profit. And guess whose property sat right in the middle of the planned development? Mine. But the most disturbing part wasn't Gregory's scheme. It was the signature at the bottom of one of the emails. Councilwoman Rebecca Vance. A local government official, someone we were supposed to trust, was helping the HOA carry out the plan. This wasn't just a neighborhood problem anymore. This was corruption at the highest level. I took the documents to my lawyer, but before we could act, his office was broken into. Every file related to my case gone. That night, the black SUV returned. This time, the driver didn't just sit there. He got out. A tall man in a dark hoodie, holding something in his hand. Before I could react, he placed a small USB drive on my mailbox and drove away without a word. Inside my house, I plugged it into an offline laptop. On it was a single video file. He knew now. The grainy footage showed Karen before her arrest meeting with Gregory and Councilwoman Vance in a dimly lit restaurant. Karen looked terrified, whispering, "If this blows up, we're all screwed." Gregory leaned in and said something that made my blood run cold. "Don't worry. If anyone gets too close, we make them disappear." I sat there frozen, realizing I was sitting on evidence that could expose not just the HOA, but an entire network of corruption tied to land grabs, intimidation, and possibly worse. But I also knew something else. If I moved forward, I was next on their list. And then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "We know you have the video." And that was how one woman's greed almost cost me everything. But you know, this wasn't just about property. It wasn't just about land. It was about principle, about standing up when someone tries to take what's yours. And maybe you know that feeling too. Because this isn't just my story. Every single day, someone out there faces the same battle: a neighbor who thinks they're entitled, an HOA board drunk on power, or a so-called friend crosses a line. Maybe it's happened to you. Maybe it's happening right now. That's why I want to hear from you. Go down to the comments and share your story. Tell me what happened, because your voice matters, and here you're not alone. This channel isn't just about drama. It's about truth. It's about justice. And it's about you. So if you haven't already, subscribe right now and turn on the bell icon, because the next story, the next fight, the next shocking betrayal, you won't want to miss it. And when you're done here, click on the playlist on your screen. Watch my other unbelievable HOA stories, the one where my neighbor tried to destroy my fence, or the one where the HOA president pocketed thousands behind everyone's back. Trust me, once you start watching, you won't be able to stop. Remember this, no matter how powerless you feel, you always have a choice. You always have a voice. And sometimes one voice is enough to spark a movement. Because in this neighborhood, the drama isn't over. In fact, it's only just begun.